Well, the sweeping tariffs announced last week by the Trump administration are set to take effect Wednesday. And speaking Sunday on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick acknowledged this is a big change, but said the tariffs would protect American interests.
This is a national security issue. I mean, we don't make medicine in this country anymore. We don't make ships. We don't have enough steel and aluminum to fight a battle, right? All our semiconductors are made overseas. We've got to start to protect ourselves, and we've got to stop having all the countries of the world ripping us off. We have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit, and the rest of the world has a surplus with us. They're earning our money. They're taking our money.
Right.
And Donald Trump has seen this, and he's going to stop it.
Lutnick also said there would be no delay on the tariffs implementation and that the president needs to reset global trade. A new report says the tariffs have caused the U.S. tariff rate to hit its highest level in nearly 120 years. The Budget Lab, a nonpartisan policy research center at Yale University, determined that the tariffs announced on April 2nd are the, quote, equivalent of a rise in the effective U.S. tariff rate of 11.5 percentage points. It found the average effective U.S. rate of all tariffs implemented so far this year is now 22.5%, the highest in more than a century. The Budget Lab says consumer prices will increase by 2.3% in the short term, costing the average American household an extra $3,800 a year. For more, let's bring in Ernie Tedeschi. He's the director of economics at the Budget Lab at Yale University. Ernie, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So the president continues to say this may cause short-term pain for families, long-term gain of leveling out the playing field, bringing back manufacturing, reducing the deficit. What does your analysis show are some of the short and long-term effects of this?
Well, the conclusion of our analysis is that there's both short-term pain and long-term pain out of this. So as you said, in the short run, prices go up by between 2 and 2.5%. That translates to an average of $3,800 per household. But the interesting thing was the long term as well. In the long run, the American economy is still smaller. What that suggests to us is that any gains that might happen on the manufacturing side, and we, by the way, are not saying that there are no instances where a factory doesn't hire up or reshore. What we are saying is that every time that does happen, there are more factories that end up having to lay off workers or end up having to close because of increased costs or because their exports are less competitive overseas. At the end of the day, the U.S. economy ends up being, roughly half a point smaller in the long run once you add up all the positives and negatives.
I want to circle back to that in a second, but you did an analysis on not only the tariffs announced this year, but also specifically how much tariffs announced Wednesday would impact households. Can you elaborate on that, and what sectors are we talking about most?
Sure. So if you just look at what was announced on April 2nd, those tariffs alone would be the equivalent of between 1 and 1.5% in prices. And those alone would be an average of $2,100 per household. Now, as you might imagine, not everybody is going to feel the same $2,100 pinch. It depends on the commodities that you buy. So no surprise, things that are imported are going to be more susceptible to tariffs. In particular, clothing is going to be the most susceptible. Electronics is also highly susceptible to the tariffs announced. The other thing to keep in mind is that lower income households are more vulnerable to these tariffs. That's because lower income households spend a larger share of their budget in general, and they spend a larger share on imports. So the pinch of tariffs is 2.5 times that on low-income families as it is on high-income families.
What impact could these tariffs have on the ongoing fight against inflation?
So they're going to raise the price level overall. Now, strictly speaking, that's not inflation, right? Inflation is the change in prices over time. What tariffs do is tariffs raise the price once, and then the prices stay at that higher level over time. But that puts the Federal Reserve in particular in a bind, because on the one hand, if you're only raising prices once, the Federal Reserve, whose mandate is inflation, should probably look through that and not worry about it. On the other hand, the Fed is very concerned about any signs of price acceleration right now, as well as any signs of economic weakness. And they're also concerned about any types of shocks to the economy that might affect supply chains again, much like what we had during the pandemic. Those types of supply side shocks might end up being inflationary, meaning it might raise the pace of price increases over time. And that would be relevant for the Fed. That's why I think that they're going to be in wait and see mode before they cut rates any further.
The Budget Lab determined U.S. real gross domestic product, or GDP, growth is down due to all tariffs implemented so far this year, including ones announced on April 2nd. What does this mean? How significant is this?
So on the one hand, this is a very meaningful shock to U.S. growth. We found that the tariffs implemented so far this year should be expected to shave a full percentage point off of U.S. growth. Just to put that in context, that's the equivalent of losing $300 billion in economic value in the U.S. in a year. On the other hand, I want to be very careful and sober about describing what that means. Because if you thought that the U.S. was going to grow at, say, 2% this year, which is most economists' projection of what trend growth is in the U.S., and you take off 1 percentage point, you're still left with 1 percentage point left. You're still in positive territory. So strictly speaking, the tariffs alone are not recessionary, I don't think. What worries me, though, number one, is that there are other shocks that are going to affect the U.S. this year, things like immigration. The other thing that worries me is that, and this, I'm being humble as an economist here, our economic models are not going to capture anything, everything. In particular, what they're bad at capturing is the uncertainty effects of, a chaotic rollout of policy where businesses and consumers, don't know what tariffs and policy are going to be tomorrow, next week, next month, leading to a chilling effect on investment. So that could make the actual effects work worse than what we're projecting here.
All right, Ernie Tedeschi, thank you for breaking down your analysis. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Well, the stock market resembled a roller coaster Monday as investors reacted to these broad global tariffs. The S&P and Dow both closed down, and now some of President Trump's wealthiest supporters have felt the impact in their own portfolios. A Forbes estimate found that 3,000 of the world's richest billionaires lost $270 billion on April 3rd, the day after the president's widespread tariffs were announced. Two of President Trump's biggest donors, Elon Musk and tech giant Larry Ellison, both lost about $10 billion on Thursday each. All of this turmoil has led one of President Trump's biggest supporters on Wall Street to issue statements against the administration's tariffs policy. As part of a long tweet against the tariffs, billionaire investor Bill Ackman defended the concept of fixing an unfair system, but stated widespread tariffs went too far. He added, quote, "This is not what we voted for," and said in a separate tweet he thinks whoever recommended the tariffs idea to Trump should be fired. Another billionaire investor, Daniel Loeb, shared this meme just hours after the widespread tariffs were announced. White Lotus fans will recognize that. On Saturday, Loeb stated it would be a question of ideology versus judgment for the administration to fix errors in the widespread tariff policy. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, didn't explicitly criticize Trump, but said the tariffs will likely cause economic harm. He said in a letter to shareholders released Monday morning, quote, "Whether or not the menu of tariffs causes a recession remains in question, but it will slow down growth." President Trump stated Monday he will not consider a 90-day pause on implementing the tariffs and that, quote, "tariffs will make this country very rich." Over the weekend, President Trump said he didn't want stocks to go down, but, quote, "sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something." In this case, he's talking about his concerns about the U.S.'s trade deficit with other countries. Online furniture and home goods retailer Wayfair's stock has rebounded slightly after it plunged by nearly 26% last week following President Trump's tariff announcement. Kate Gulliver joins us now. She's the chief financial officer at Wayfair. Kate, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
In Studio 57. Let's go ahead and talk about how this will impact your business. What are you guys talking about behind closed doors, and are you having to rejiggy?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Obviously, this has been something that we've all been preparing for some time. Like many in the furniture industry, we source product from all over the world, including parts of Asia, but also the U.S., domestic. Unlike other retailers, though, we operate more as a marketplace. So that means we work with 20,000 suppliers from across the globe, and those suppliers compete in the marketplace for consumers' attention and consumer purchases. So, for example, if you're trying to buy a nightstand, we sell a lot of different nightstands, and each supplier sets the wholesale price, which ultimately leads to the retail price, to try to get pushed up in that sort order so that you're more likely to convert on their nightstand versus somebody else's nightstand. And we do think that marketplace dynamic, gives us some natural advantages during such a sort of tumultuous time.
So are you saying essentially that if a company is willing to eat more of these tariff costs, that your algorithm will serve it up higher when I'm looking for a nightstand?
If the combination of the retail price and the quality of that product is better and the availability is better, then yes, the algorithm will move it higher in the sort order. So when you have a lot of highly substitutable products like we do, and you have the marketplace dynamic versus a product that we have designed being built to our spec in a specific country with a specific manufacturer, that gives you a lot of flexibility. And I think right now, given how complex the operating environment is, flexibility is really to our advantage.
Why do you think investors got so spooked last week?
I think folks, what you're seeing on sort of Thursday and Friday last week is folks are reacting to companies where there is a sort of perceived exposure to insourcing from where tariffs are. Obviously, folks can look at sort of domestic or sort of inflows into the U.S. of furniture, and much of that does come from, Asia and other parts of the world. We source from everywhere, so we actually have domestic suppliers. We have suppliers in Asia.
What percentage are domestic?
Yeah, we don't actually disclose specific percentages because it moves around. And so what you see is, because exactly your point on getting pushed up by the algorithm, on any given day, the mix can change quite a bit depending on where prices are competitive, how quickly that product can get to you, and the quality of that product.
Do you find overall that maybe in yesteryear, or still present day because the tariffs haven't fully taken effect, that a nightstand from a country in Asia might have been cheaper, but now it'll be on par with the U.S.-made brand, and so you'll actually probably see the domestic products featured in similar placement on your website as the international exports?
Yeah, I would say that right now there's still too many moving pieces to say how it all lands out. So what we're seeing happen, and what we will continue to work with our suppliers on, is we want to help our suppliers, many of whom we've partnered with over the 20-plus years that we've operated, understand here's what might be some of the impacts if wholesale prices raise, and here's how you can continue to maintain share. And that's our focus, because ultimately what we want to deliver the best for the customer. And so whether that's a domestic product or a product that's imported, we want the best value for her, the most price efficient, and the most compelling quality for her.
But could you be straight with us and level with our viewers? Will prices go up? Should people expect some increase on merchandise on Wayfair's website?
Yeah, again, it's very dynamic right now, so it's hard to know exactly what will happen. But what you could imagine happening over time is, as wholesales evolve, that ultimately sort of returns in what the retail price is. The natural competitive dynamic, though, helps keep that retail price really efficient for the customer. So we want to make sure we enable that competition, that we're working with our suppliers so they have all the information possible to participate in that competition and hopefully keep things as competitive as possible for the consumer. And we've done that over the 23-plus years we've operated, and we've maintained significant share growth over that time as a result of keeping things efficient.
But everything is going to get more expensive. So, yes, competition is a part of it. But at the same time, if everybody has to pay X tariff, we're going to have to pay more.
Again,
something's going to have to give.
Things are moving very rapidly, and it's quite dynamic right now.
All right, Kate Gulliver, thank you.
Thank you.
If you have questions about all things tariff, we have answers. Just head to the CBS News Instagram page. Add your question in the comments on this post. You can also scan the QR code on your screen right now. Our Money Watch experts, Jill Schlesinger and Kelly O'Grady, will join us on the show Wednesday to answer them. Our special tariffs edition of the Daily Report airs Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7.